So I'm going to spend the next 20 or so minutes talking about the democratization of space. So focused on commercial space and private sector space and opening space up for more and more stakeholders. But before I do that, I wanted to first put up this picture. This is one of my favorite pictures of one of my used-to-be favorite planets, Saturn. And I don't actually know why Saturn was my favorite planet when I was little. I think as a little kid, maybe the rings made me just curious about the planet, or perhaps the fact that Saturn's average density is less than water. So if we ever had a bathtub that could fit Saturn, it would float. And I remember as a little child, I drew a picture of Saturn in a bathtub for one of my school projects. So there's a lot to love about this planet. But if you noticed, I said Saturn was my favorite planet. After I went to space in 2021, a few months later, during an interview, someone asked me what my favorite planet was. And I instinctively said Earth. I didn't even think about it, I just said Earth. And I realized after that interview, after I had gone to space and had that incredible experience of viewing our planet, it became my favorite planet. So this is one of my favorite pictures because Earth is actually in this picture. So if you were paying attention earlier when I accidentally flipped to the next slide, you'll know where it is. But let's see if I can get this. There is Earth in this picture. We're there. That little pixel looks like a little speck of dust. And from this perspective, it looks so small. And from anybody that's observing Earth, or anything or anyone that's observing Earth from outside of where we are in the solar system, we look so very small. But it's a good reminder that when we're here, that we're anything but, and the life that we're living should be anything but small. So that is a very, tangent to what I'm going to talk about, but I wanted to just put that in perspective as I saw this picture recently. So we have an incredible plenary panel coming up to talk about commercial low Earth orbit destinations for humans, for research, for technology, and it's coming up after my talk. And I just want to let that sink in, that we are about to get together and hear from companies that are actually planning on investing private capital to build destinations in LEO. And those are destinations that we all hopefully physically can visit one day or can visit through our research, science, and technology development. So that's incredibly, incredibly cool. And it drives you to ask, how did we get here? Well, I don't know about you. I got here through a 15-hour plane ride that was delayed multiple times. I'm kidding. I'm just seeing if anybody's awake. No, how did we get to a place in industry where private companies are investing their capital to do these incredible things, to build LEO destinations? So let's talk about that. Let's talk about how we got to a point in our industry where commercial companies are building payloads, they're launching payloads, they're building habitats and wanting to go to the moon. So let's start at the beginning. So this is Sputnik. Again, just making sure we're all awake this morning. It's Sputnik. I was hoping everybody in the audience would say Sputnik together, but we'll work on that for the next one. But of course, the first satellite was Sputnik, launched in 1957 by the Soviet Union, a government satellite. So I'm sure that people in the audience know what this is. I can't hear anything. It's not the Death Star. It's not R2-D2's cousin. It is Telstar 1. It's a satellite that was funded by a private entity and built by a private entity. So this is a satellite that was funded by AT&T and developed by Bell Telephone Laboratories and launched in 1962. So Telstar 1 was capable of relaying television signals across the Atlantic Ocean and was the first satellite to transmit live television and other data signals across the pond from Europe to America. And after the successful transmission on July 11th, 1962, the then US President, John F. Kennedy, released a statement that called it an outstanding example of the way in which government and business can cooperate in the most important field of human endeavor. So that is definitely foreshadowing for the rest of my talk here. So the next set of satellites after Telstar 1 was SYNCOM 1 and SYNCOM 2, developed by the Hughes Aircraft Company. And after that batch, Hughes Aircraft developed another satellite called SYNCOM 3 in 1964, and it was the satellite that was first deployed to geosynchronous orbit to actually be leased to the Department of Defense, setting up public-private partnerships, and also, most importantly, was the one to telecast the 1964 Olympic Games for the first time from Tokyo to the world. So, see, for all the young people in the audience, there was a time where we couldn't watch every single Olympic sport on demand live. This is how you build a commercial market. You get people addicted to watching sports on demand, addicted to watching, I don't know, track and field, shot put at 2 a.m. because you can. And for me, I watch cricket at very early hours in the morning. But actually, so cricket is now going to be in the LA 2028 games for the first time in years. So everybody else is going to have to watch them at 3 a.m. I will be watching it live in LA because that's where I'm based. So if anybody's in LA, come say hi. But I'm really excited. And I know I just digressed, but it was very exciting for me to see that cricket is going to be in the 2028 games. So in all seriousness, this was the beginning of building commercial capabilities and economies beyond our planet's atmosphere. Now, all of these satellites that I talked about, while developed and had private investment, were launched by government-owned and government-operated launch vehicles. Now, launch really didn't become commercialized until much later because of a few different factors. One, the barrier to entry for launch is quite high. It takes a lot of upfront capital. Two, it's quite literally rocket science. The technology to develop it is complex, and to add on top of that, you have to make innovations in not only the launch technology, but manufacturing and operations to get something like that to be scalable profitably for commercial companies. And three, you have to have a robust market to support the high cost of the service. And in the beginning, that market hadn't developed, but as more and more commercial uses of space came online, both for satellites and human spaceflight, we started seeing that market grow, and some of the launch prices, as more entrants came into the field, come down. They're still quite high, but they're coming down. So the first recognized commercial launch provider was Arianespace. The Ariane 1, which launched in 1979, was the first launcher to be developed with the primary purpose of sending commercial satellites into geosynchronous orbit. And uniquely, which at the time was a unique concept, but it was designed to send a pair of satellites to orbit on a single launcher, bringing the cost for the launcher and for the customer down. So back to those technologies and way of thinking for commercial companies to reduce the cost of the service. So, however, for all of the reasons I listed earlier, there was still a lot of trouble getting the industry to, dare I say it, take off. So it really, really wasn't until later in the 2000s when we started seeing a lot more launch companies come in to service the robust market sector that was being developed. And in the 2000s, we started seeing more private investment in launch because the market for satellites were there. Communication satellites, Earth observation, and other satellites had really taken off at that point and created a market and a pathway for even more innovation in launch. So I think a lot of you in the audience know SpaceX was founded in 2002 when Elon Musk tried to acquire an upper Russian launch vehicle and was surprised on the scarcity, on the price, and the timeline to get something into orbit. So instead, being an entrepreneur, started SpaceX to develop a launch capability for himself and for all the priorities he was looking for. Virgin Galactic was started in 2004 after the NSRA X Prize, which we'll get into a little bit later, Blue Origin in 2000. So as I said, a lot of companies came in 2000 to develop this private sector launch capability. And it also drove more investment in space in general for on-orbit capabilities, for driving more startups into the space environment, and just getting the next killer app in space because we started seeing access to space open up. So one of the areas of commercial launch, one of the areas that commercial launch has enabled is human spaceflight. And I'm sure it comes as no surprise that I am a huge fan of commercial spaceflight. So I want to take a little moment to talk about the commercialization of human access to space. So in 2004, and I skipped all of these boring stats because I know you can find them online. Rather talk about cricket and the Olympics, of course. So in 2004, Scaled Composites won the NSRA X Prize. And the NSRA X Prize is an award that was given to the first privately funded and privately developed vehicle to take humans to space and then do it again in 2 weeks. So it was showcasing that there was private investment available, private sector ingenuity, but also sustainability, that it wasn't just a one-off venture, that you could do it again and make it a business. So Spaceship One was awarded the NSRA X Prize by flying 2 pilots, Brian Binney and Mike Melville, to space and back and doing it twice. And that really kicked off the commercialization of human spaceflight. And I'm going to take one more tangent because this 2004 event is quite personal to me. So I know people who know me know that I have wanted to be an astronaut since I was very little. So I grew up I was born in Denali, and I remember one of my very first memories was sleeping on my grandfather's roof and looking up at the stars and just seeing how bright they were, I almost felt like I could reach out and just touch the stars. And that was my very first memory of wanting to go to space. And since then, I just couldn't get it out of my mind. So everything I did was to go to space from there on out. So I learned all about the astronauts before me, how they went to space and tried to follow in their footsteps. I learned how to fly an airplane before I learned how to drive a car, which my mother was very thrilled about. And I decided to go into aerospace engineering. So I was doing everything I could to become an astronaut. Unfortunately, as much as we try to control our lives, we're often reminded in many ways that we are not always in control, and there are quite a lot of other factors that drive us to where we're going. And for me, in 2004, I found out that my eyesight had deteriorated. So I've always had pretty bad eyesight growing up as a child, but it wasn't until I was 16 years old in 2004 that my eyesight got to a point where I was disqualified from becoming a NASA astronaut. And I was looking at becoming a NASA astronaut because that was, at the time, one of the very few ways that people could go to space. And of course, I was devastated. I didn't know what to do. I looked around for other things that would interest me as much as space had interested me, but really couldn't find something that resonated as much as going to space and spaceflight did. So I was trying to figure out what to do until, coincidentally, in 2004, the NSRE X Prize happened. And I saw the NSRE X Prize. I saw Spaceship One go to space with Mike Melville and Brian Binney. I saw incredible investors and entrepreneurs step up, including Sir Richard Branson, after the NSRE X Prize, and state that they were going to take the technology of Spaceship One and create a company and technology based on Spaceship One to open space up for everybody and create a company called Virgin Galactic. So I'm seeing this in 2004 and thinking, okay, there's more ways to go to space than just NASA. I'm going to study hard and do all I can to go work for Virgin Galactic and go to space with them. This was in 2004, so I didn't realize that I manifested it as literally as I did that day and that year. And about 18 years later, I found myself on the tarmac with Spaceship One's successor, Spaceship Two, about to go on the first test flight of the vehicle with this wonderful crew next to me and test the vehicle for our future customers. So our whole role on the flight was to test the interiors and test the experience for our customers in the future. And my role specifically was to test the capability of this vehicle to conduct microgravity science. So I took up some research with me to conduct while I was in space. And of course, spoiler alert, it was a great vehicle to conduct microgravity research, and we conducted a lot of tests that day that made the rest of our flights for our customers very successful and comfortable. And of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't say, while I was doing all this work in space, I did not take it for granted. I definitely took a look out the window and took this incredible view of our planet in with every inch of my being. And I love this picture because this was taken on my first look outside the window. And I think a picture says way more than I can ever say, but I felt quite connected, probably even more connected to Earth than I ever have, even though I'm not even on the planet. It was like having an out-of-body experience, taking yourself out and looking back in at yourself. And there was nothing more inspiring and truly empowering about that experience. And that's really the reason that I'm excited to see more and more humans go to space, because there is absolutely no way you can go to space and see the planet and not come back and feel like you are empowered, inspired, and have a perspective shift on your life. So I want to pull on that thread a little bit more and talk about the humans that have gone to space. So for extra credit, this is Yuri, yes, Yuri Gagarin, the first person that has gone to space in 1961. And since then, multiple government agencies have built human spaceflight programs, creating vehicles that allow humans to go to space. But up until recently, all of those vehicles and the human spaceflight programs have been government-owned and government-operated. After 2004, we saw a lot more companies who had developed launch vehicles enter the human spaceflight environment and creating platforms that allow humans to go to space, to experience space, but also to conduct research in space. Because up until now, if researchers wanted to conduct research in space, it'd either go up on a satellite as an autonomous payload, or you would hand your payload off to one of the government agency astronauts that would conduct the science and the research for you in space. But with suborbital vehicles and with orbital vehicles by private companies, you're now able to, as a scientist and researcher, go up to space with your work and conduct your own work and your own research. So putting all of that into perspective, we had a little over 700 people have gone to space to date. And I'm using 2004 as the milestone and the platform for when human commercial spaceflight took off. So up until 2004, you've had about 440 people go to space. 0 people out of that group went up on commercial launch vehicles, and 7 of those people were non-government astronauts. So those were people that had paid to go to the International Space Station or otherwise experience space. One of those people that I included was a mission specialist from McDonnell Douglas, so it wasn't technically a government astronaut, but I included him in the 7 people. After 2004, we have 295 people go to space, 142 of those on commercial launch vehicles, and 127 of those people went as non-government astronauts. And, oh man, I just decided to do math in public, which could be very embarrassing for me. So it's 40% of people in the last 20 years have gone to space, and just under 20%, under 20% have been non-government astronauts, which is incredible to think about the whole timeline of humans accessing space. You're seeing this exponential rise in people going to space, and I think it's quite exciting because you're seeing a diversity of reasons, whether it's for just the experience or whether it's for living and working in space, or for conducting research campaigns and technology development. You're seeing a diversity in the people going to space. They're not just engineers and pilots, but they're also artists, lawyers, communicators, filmmakers. And I think that is what I find very exciting, that we're now going to be seeing spaceflight through the lens of so many more people from so many different areas on this planet. So, before I move on, I will just say I've talked a lot about commercialization of space because that is the topic of my talk, but I wanted to just give a nod to the government. This isn't commercial versus the government. It is a partnership with government. This is a slide from NASA just showing the fleet of vehicles that they've launched to different destinations. And they're doing, with their investment, audacious things and going to places that have no market for commercial. However, they're partnering with commercial to ease the investment needed and allowing commercial to take over those destinations that have a market, and they're able to become a customer. And these are very efficient and effective ways to further our reach in the universe. And I love this slide because these kinds of missions are expanding our knowledge of the universe, of our place in it, and they're doing it hand in hand in commercial. I mean, these are the missions that showed, that first image I showed on my first slide of the Cassini spacecraft taking that picture of Saturn came from one of these missions. So again, it's not government versus commercial, it's government and commercial as we continue our endeavors in space. So what's next? Commercial space, I hope you've taken away, is an enabler. So we're just at the cusp of more and more research into space. We're at the cusp of more technologies being developed to further our exploration of space, as well as better our lives here on Earth. And we're definitely at the cusp of sending more and more humans to space that are going to be experiencing space, living and working there, and seeing the beauty and that perspective shift that comes with it. So personally, I'm very, very excited about the next few years, the next decade, and what's going to be coming in space with both government and commercial companies. And one thing I'm quite excited for is what you're going to hear in the next plenary of commercial companies talking about habitats in LEO, where we can all hopefully go one day, or at least send our research and our technologies. So this is just the beginning. Hopefully this history lesson has set up a good foundation for some of the other plenaries that are coming on later today. So thank you.